Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Let's give everybody a couple minutes to jump on. My name is Karen Karoff. I am a registered dietitian and life coach here with The Watering Mouth, helping my clients lose that weight for once and for all and put that struggle away with emotional eating. Today, we are going to be talking about chapter 2 in the End of Dieting. It's a little virtual book club that we're doing. You can go ahead and get the book, or you can just listen in because I will give you a synopsis of the book as we go along. Let me know if you can hear me. Please reach out to me. This is interactive. Leave me messages. Tell me what you liked about this chapter, talking about the diet myths out there. And super interesting, I think. Only because we hear about them so often. And I would say that most people don't really dig deep into looking at the science behind these diets. Like we hear it and the newspaper tells us that this was a great diet to do, right? Like we should totally jump right on board. And sometimes we believe that. Of course, I don't believe it because I never believe anything the newspapers are putting out about science because I've learned in the past, right? So it was super interesting, I think, to take a look at the science that Dr. Fuhrman provides that really tells us a bit about these diets. So, like I said, tell me what really struck you when you were going over this. And if you're there and you're watching and you can hear me, chime in. Let me know. Hopefully, I'm just not moving my mouth and you can't hear me. If you're watching on replay, awesome. I'm super excited that you're watching on replay. Just leave comments also if you have questions. I pop back on a couple times a week and make sure there are no questions to my videos. So I'm happy to answer any of the questions that come up for you. Put them in there. So I thought it was really timely with what's going on everywhere, where he opened up this chapter talking about selective perception, which is similar to confirmation bias. So if we equate this to diet, that would kind of be like a Texan rancher who's super into cattle and eating beef, choosing the paleo diet and just kind of ignoring all of the clearly obvious science out there because that's what he wants to believe. It's kind of you ignore all the evidence to really make sure that your beliefs get reinforced. And so I thought that was super interesting. Is that how you understood selective perception here? Let me know what you thought about that and if you see that happening too. You know, with all of the diets, right? People that like to eat meat go for the meat diets. People that sometimes want to just eat pasta might go for like the pasta only diet, or, all of these crazy diets out there. You can look for evidence, not really good scientific evidence, but if you're going to just become like a Google doctor, right? You can look for evidence out there to back up any belief that you have. I mean, I think probably if you put like, let's see, like the Skittles diet in there, there'd probably be like someone that had a Skittles diet that they'd be like, oh, it's perfect, you lose weight. So I just thought it was great that he opened up by saying that. And I love the second thing he was saying, and I totally believe, right, that there's no magical ratio of fat, carbohydrates, and protein. And for so many years, we were looking for that magical ratio, like how it's 70, 30. No, that would not leave enough. 40, 30, 30, like what was that ratio? And what he really talks about is, weight loss and superior health is more due to the micronutrient content. So like how healthy the foods you're eating and less about what that ratio is. Certainly the ratio comes into play a little bit, right? Like you can't eat like 90% fat and think that you're doing well. But I think the point here is if you're focusing on the real food, the foods that have tons of micronutrients, antioxidants in them, then you don't have to worry about that macronutrient ratio. Even though like plenty of people have like made diets, right, trying to make money based on that. He talks about the 3 irrefutable facts about health and foods. I agree with this. I'm hard-pressed to find an educated person that does not agree with this. And those 3 facts are vegetables, beans, seeds, fruits, and nuts are good for you. Yeah, they are. Right? Awesome. So that's the first thing. Excessive amounts of meat or animal products cause disease. Yes, like totally proven. So people that like want to put their blinders on, you're wearing blinders because there's so much evidence out there proving it. And eliminating refined carbohydrates will help with sustainable weight loss and overall health. Again, 100%, right? Those refined carbohydrates are things like white bread, white pasta, Pop-Tarts, sugared cereal, all of those things. So, he talks about a couple of diets in particular. The Mediterranean diet, the standard American diet, we all know that's not good. Paleo, wheat belly, and low-fat veganism. So, those are the ones that he really goes over in chapter 2, which is what we're doing this week. So I want to ask you what you think the top 3 sources of calories in your diet are. And if you're watching, just pop that in the comments. And if you're watching later, pop it in the comments too. I'm going to tell you in a little bit of the top 3 source of calories for the standard American diet. So we all know that standard American diet isn't good, right? It has tons of oil. Oil is purely empty calories. It's a refined food, 120 calories per tablespoon. Your body has to do like next to nothing to digest it. So it goes right into your bloodstream as fat. It can get stored super easily. And it also contains a suspected carcinogen when you heat it up. So this is like one of the really negative things of the standard American diet. Increase your body fat, increase your likelihood of cancer and many other chronic diseases. So standard American diet, tons of oil and tons of refined carbohydrates, pasta and white bread, those sort of foods, super poor source of nutrients, easily digestible, easily converted into body fat. So, he really, really talks about how, and I talk about this a lot too, right? So we all might have this genetic predisposition. And so many people say, well, I mean, I'm genetically predisposed to it. Yeah, like you might be, right? But that's like a light switch and the light could be off. It might never have to be turned on, right? But when we eat these types of foods, we're flicking that switch. Like we're turning on our propensity to have these chronic diseases. We might not get the diabetes, the heart disease, the cancer if we weren't eating these types of foods, which is why it's so important to flood our body with the nutrients instead of this junk food. So we don't have to end up with chronic diseases. Like it's not you turn 70, you get hypertension, you get high blood pressure. That doesn't have to be the way if we treat our bodies well and we flood our bodies with the right nutrients instead of filling our bodies with toxic foods. So, chronic disease, animal products certainly have a huge play in that. Refined carbohydrates certainly have a huge play in that, right? When we're eating all of those foods, there aren't enough micronutrients, so it almost gets sucked out of our cells, so to speak. So this is, one of the reasons that the standard American diet is so unhealthy for us. So, so I asked you what the top 3 sources of calories in your diet are. Standard American diet, the top 3 sources are milk, soda, and margarine. Super high in calories, and the milk and margarine, super high in saturated fat. And margarine, well, trans fat is kind of not allowed anymore, but, super unhealthy. So, we have to make sure our diet is mostly unrefined plant foods in order to be healthy. Here's the thing with the Mediterranean diet. There are tons of great things about the Mediterranean diet, but what he's suggesting, I'm actually going to go on the paleo diet first, but what he suggests with all these diets is, okay, take the good parts of them and leave the bad. There's no reason why you have to only do it one way. We can recognize what they're doing right and take that and see what they're doing wrong and leave that on the table. So, and he actually goes so far as to say, like, most Americans are overweight. If you're eating the standard American diet, you're overweight. If you're eating the standard American diet and you're not overweight, he goes as far as to say you're most likely battling something else like alcoholism, depression, maybe anxiety, maybe an autoimmune disease. So he says that there really are not any healthy overweight people. And there was a time that they were saying, and some of the studies were showing that, yes, You can be overweight and be healthy. But he's saying that even without showing, right, some of these metabolic abnormalities, some of these diseases like hypertension or diabetes, when you're overweight, you still have that higher risk for a heart attack. So, and he really points out here, which is what I say, and I'm kind of a broken record here, right? Like high blood pressure, obesity, heart disease are not natural consequences of aging. This is not just something you hit 60, you hit 70, of course it shows up. No, it doesn't have to show up. You don't have to take medication as you get older. You don't have to have a life of pills. You don't have to have a life of aches, right? Like you can create a different outcome based on what you're putting in your mouth. The input that goes in is going to create a different outcome. So he talks about Paleo Diet, right? This comes in many names, right? It comes by the name of Atkins. It comes by the name of Sugar Busters, of South Beach. That was like a huge one for a while, right? The Dukin Diet, which, so they have many different names. And the good thing about this, what is the good thing? Like let's not say the whole thing is bad, because there are good parts of it. So the good part is it cuts out the refined sugar, the white flour, the processed oils, and processed meats. That's good. But actually, and it doesn't, not all of them cut out the processed meats, but it replaces those calories with meat. And that's just ridiculous, right? Like there is just no doubt that excess meat causes health issues. There's no doubt. There's like tons of evidence for that. So, and the other negative thing is it tells you to stay away from beans and whole grains. And like there's so much evidence about the benefits of beans, right? It reduces cancer, it increases longevity. Like if you imagine a scrub brush or even like a toothbrush, like that's what beans do to like your insides, right? So it's going through your digestive system, they're scrubbing it clean. And it's telling you to like avoid all of that. So, this kind of diet completely ignores the research that says that meat's hazardous, right? The saturated fat in meat, the cholesterol, the arachidonic acid, the IGF-1 promoting aspect of meat. Like these are all, there's tons of evidence that they completely ignore for this. The research shows having fewer than 10% of calories from animal products is correlated with the lowest cancer risk. And now they're even saying 5%. And the reason it's 5 and 10% is that there just aren't any studies where they're comparing it 0%. So that's just as low as our studies go. The standard American diet is about 30% animal product, which is a little crazy, right? But paleo is recommending 60 to 80%. Like that's so dangerous. And it was kind of funny. He said the only people that could possibly believe this, right, are the earth is flat people. And because there are still people out there that think the earth is flat. And maybe you do, and you're going to comment and yell at me. But like, I think for the most part, like, come on, we all know the earth isn't flat. And if we know the earth isn't flat, then we should know that the paleo diet is not healthy. He talks about the protein myth in vegans because it's like, oh, you need protein, you need protein, you need protein. He says that maybe taurine is the only deficiency he sees. Some other nutrients that he watches for are B12, right? We all know that we have to kind of watch our B12. Even meat eaters, to be honest with you, as they age, have to watch the B12 because B12 isn't innately in meat, it's in the soil. So, watch your B12, he says, watch your zinc, watch your iodine, and he includes watching your EPA and DHA, your essential fatty acids. And I agree with this. Like we shouldn't have this huge divide anymore with these diets. And that's what he's saying in his chapter 2, because the evidence is pretty clear. Like there are like some little tweaks here and there that you can go one way, go another way, but the gap isn't like it used to be. There isn't this huge gap. There's media really putting out a lot of confusing information, but the gap and the research just isn't there. So I think we can kind of all agree paleo is not the way to go, right? And especially if you're watching this video, I'm sure you can agree. It's not just Dr. Fuhrman's opinion, right? Like, because sometimes in a book, it's a lot of opinion. It's not just opinion. He's showing you the data. He's, even linking it in the back if you want to look at the research study that's like paleo, not the way to go. So then we move on to the Mediterranean diet. And this one, got a lot of people that wanted to follow, right? Because it's like, oh, it's the Mediterranean diet. It's it's such great food. And, just like with the paleo diet, there's some good stuff and there's, some not so good stuff. Way more good stuff in the Mediterranean than the paleo, but what can we take from the Mediterranean and And then what can we leave from it? So, the good part of the Mediterranean diet is it's super high in plants, like lots of fruits, lots of veggies, lots of cereal, legumes, nuts, barely any red meat, tiny bit of chicken and fish. Like these are all really good things. Then we get to like the white pasta. That's the stuff that we would want to leave out, right? It has the red wine. It says 1 glass of red wine. He didn't even get into that evidence, so I'm not going to get into that evidence about the red wine. That's for another day. You know, the environment, like the climate is great for growing things. Like they have a lot of tomatoes, they have a lot of broccoli, they're adding the garlic and onions. Like, so there's some really, really great qualities of the Mediterranean diet. The phytochemicals there's a low amount of saturated fat intake. So yeah, it looks pretty darn good compared to paleo, right? But, let's leave that unhealthy food like the excess oil, the white pasta, the white bread, like the white pasta and white bread, it's like just like sugar. Just like the white rice in Japanese cuisine, leave the white rice and take the beneficial aspects of that. You know, just like that, leave the white pasta and take the beneficial aspects of the Mediterranean diet. A lot of the studies put olive oil against butter, and olive oil looked like a hero, right? But just because it looks like a hero against butter doesn't mean it looks like a hero against not having oil. It's completely calorie dense. That 120 calories per tablespoon gets absorbed super quickly right into your cells. So that's something that we want to avoid. It's a highly, highly processed foods. So, we need more data, really. There is a study actually that compares like oil with nuts substituted for oils. And when you substituted nuts for the oil, it showed that it really reduced atherosclerotic plaque, which is the stuff that's dangerous in your heart and your body. So it does show that if you take those calories on olive oil and replace them with nuts, it's much more beneficial, right? Because that oil is just super highly refined. They took an olive, they ground it up, they pressed it, they ground it, they pressed it, they stepped on it, like all of that stuff. And what's left is that oil, which is super, super refined. Same thing as taking brown rice and polishing off the outside coating and making it into white rice. Like you're taking off all those B vitamins, when you're doing that, all those nutrients. So this is just another process of being refined, and all of it, and oil is a very, very, very refined food. So, we all really agree on a lot of these basics. So yeah, the Mediterranean, let's take the beneficial aspects of the Mediterranean and then leave those negative aspects. The next one he refers to, so we went over paleo, we went over Mediterranean, and then he talks about wheat belly, and we went over standard American diet. And the wheat belly diet, that one, it's like, do we even need to be talking about the wheat belly diet? I love how he's putting the data in here, because when you break it down, it's really kind of crazy, right? So it's saying that genetically altered wheat is the main reason our society is sick and overweight. So he's saying that like the wheat that's been growing throughout the years, not GMO wheat, just like the way it's changed over the years, is the problem. So he completely ignores like the meat. He completely ignores like all the other aspects of why we're sick and overweight, and says it's because of the wheat. And then he uses all the studies that are using white flour to say that the wheat is bad. And there's a difference. I think we can all agree between white flour and whole wheat flour. So you can't use a white flour study and a white sugar study, a processed refined carbohydrate study, and then use that to say that wheat is bad. It's just not good science. It's kind of ridiculous. So he also says that wheat is more glycemic than white sugar, which is like completely false. So this doesn't make any sense. He talks about, the wheat allergies, but there's like a 0.4 at the time that this book was written. Dr. Fuhrman wrote a 0.4% of our population in the US is allergic to wheat. And then we have celiac disease, right, which is a big issue, 1%. Okay, only 1%. And then we have non-celiac gluten intolerance. And that's maybe 6%. So that's 7.4%. That's less than 7.5% of the population having an issue. But by the way he wrote this book and the way he promoted this, you would think like 50, 60% of us all have this issue. So, he also advocates for unlimited eggs, meat, oil, and fish. So I think we can really take a look at this diet and think, what in the world? Like, we just know that this is not super great. If you use your deductive reasoning skills when you're reading it, and you don't just believe what he's feeding you, then it really doesn't make a lot of sense. He says this amylopectin A is a villain. Like, this is what he's saying is so bad about the wheat. But that's exactly what's present in oats and brown rice and barley. And he allows that. So there are just so many incongruencies here. I think we can definitely leave the wheat belly diet on the table. And I'm not even sure what we want to take out of that that's actually good. I mean, the vegetables. I'm sure he'd let you have vegetables. But other than that, then he talks about the low-fat fallacies. And, it was interesting to read. He didn't use so much science and data with the low-fat fallacies. He's more referring to what he's seen in his practice. And he does say some people need more fat and protein, which we all really agree upon, right? Like children, athletes, pregnant, nursing women, older adults. Like there are some times that you need more of different nutrients. He says many of the studies, the reason he says you don't have to be low fat is that many of the studies used oil and not nuts and seeds to say that the oil was bad. So, he has like an interesting point of view here. And he was saying that many of his clients came to him with fatty acid deficiency, right? Because he recommends DHA and EPA supplementation, and not all of these low-fat, plant-based vegan doctors recommend that. So, he's saying that he would see the dry skin, that he would see the depression, the fatigue, maybe poor recovery after exercise. And when he increased fat, nuts, seeds, he saw this improve. And he started kind of testing, he's saying, DHA and the fatty acid levels in people's body and supplementing as necessary. He doesn't actually call out any doctors in particular, which I thought was kind of interesting. So in the other areas, right, he calls out them by name. And here he just says low fat vegan doctor. So I thought that was kind of interesting how he didn't call anybody out in particular in his book. So, he talked about the study that Dean Ornish published and then that Esselstyn followed. Dean Ornish has put out information. He's like one of the founder, he's done a lot for this plant-based vegan health movement to really start the research going. And Esselstyn followed. He took patients, I don't know if you're familiar with him, that they basically had given up on. They basically were like, just go home and get your affairs in order. Like, it's end of life for you. Really bad heart disease. And put them on this diet where, he does a lot of greens and strict rules and had amazing results. So that was very interesting, but they're very low fat. So I'm wondering that's probably who he's referring to. Like I said, it was very interesting reading here too. He says how it's important to have a couple, he quotes a study that has nuts, like walnuts a couple times a week. A lot of the low fat diets, the other doctors out there are still saying nuts are okay once in a while. So there wasn't so much differentiation here at this last point. Some interesting stuff that he says that he saw in his research. And I'm always learning about this, and there's so much to be had, right? So his recommendation is that 200 milligrams of DHA and EPA a day. He says at least 100 milligrams of DHA within that pill, or he recommends like a gram of fish oil, purified fish oil, of course, every other day. So that's what his recommendations are. And then he talks about like, maybe the zinc and the B12 is something that you want to look into, those other things that I mentioned earlier, that sometimes you're missing when you have a very low fat. I think he was referring a little bit to also the completely raw vegans. So yeah, I would love to see some more research out there with the intricacies. But to be honest with you, like we all know, this is a generalized way for health. And even when we get down to this point, it's like there's still leap years better than following something like the paleo diet or the wheat belly diet, right? So these are just kind of little intricacies to switch around. So, it was very interesting, I thought, chapter 2, learning all about these diet myths. I think it's great to be able to have someone else distill the information for you, right? You can get so lost in the research, and it can be very confusing and even hard to find the studies to read about what these people are saying. But I think a big takeaway from this is, when you're watching the news, when you see a magazine article that's claiming, the best diet now, or eat your butter, bacon's great for you. Clearly it's not. Really kind of be like a little investigator about it, because so often they manipulate the results of the data. So don't believe everything that you're seeing and reading, and make sure you go to a source that has the science to back up what they're saying. And that's what, we were kind of looking through chapter 2. So we're going to do chapter 3 next week, next Friday. And I think it's going to be super interesting. Chapter 3 is about, let me pull it up right here. The end of dieting, he calls it. So, we're going to go over that next week. Don't forget, there are tons of great recipes in the back, right? If you want to try some new recipes this week, jump on here and try it. So, there wasn't a lot, just the beginning of the chapter 1 last week. You can always go back and find that in the Watering Mouth channel that talks about emotional eating. I put the link in the show notes. I'm going to put it right here as well in the comment section. If you are interested in joining the academy, right? This is something that Sherry has created. It's really great. It's called the Eat to Live Academy. And she is opening the wait list right now for this academy. It's only opens up every once in a while. And this is an 8-week program that you can learn about through that link and join the wait list. You'll be able to really delve in a little bit more to the emotional eating aspect of this. And if that's a concern of yours, that you battle that, then this is like the mindset information that you need with food, but with the rest of your life too, to kind of get to the next level. So I'm going to leave that in the comment section. Like I said, if you're watching on replay, comment, let me know what questions you had, like what really stuck out for you in this chapter. Like, what did you think about those diets? Did you learn anything new? Did you walk away and think, oh yeah, I see this differently now? Let me know. Like, I'm super interested. What would you like to see different next week? Like, this is for you guys. So I'm just disseminating information to you, and I want to make sure you're getting the best information for you. So once again, my name is Karen Karoff. I am the registered dietitian and a life coach here at the Watering Mouth. And it has been my pleasure to do this virtual book club with you today for chapter 2 of The End of Dieting. Have a great weekend, TGIF.